Hello everyone and welcome to a video idea that I've had for a little while now. I didn't quite know when I would get around to making this video, but considering the circumstances that both I and a lot of other people are in at this point in time, thanks to you-know-what, this seems like the right time to do it. And it's not a particularly serious video, it's just a fun little thing that I thought would be interesting for you guys to see and would be fun for me to make. So the idea I had was really simple, just talk about my 5 favourite movies from the year I was born, and that year happens to be 1997. Like I said, nothing particularly serious of a video, just a fun little thing I thought would be interesting for you guys to see, and it also gives me the chance to talk about some older movies that I may not necessarily have the chance to talk about in any other video. So in that case, it's a win-win scenario. Now, looking back at the movies that were released in 1997 for the sake of this video, I found that there was actually a lot of really good stuff released in that year, which made my job even harder than it already was, whittling down so many great movies just to a small list of 5 really good ones. And yeah, it was a really hard task to do because I was admitting a lot of really good movies that under any other circumstance would have probably made this list if it wasn't for the 5 that I really like. But yeah, that means a lot of really good movies were omitted, and unfortunately, as good as they are, didn't make my top 5. So we're talking about movies like Boogie Nights, Jackie Brown, Hercules, the original Men in Black, The Fifth Element, and even The Full Monty. All really good movies, but unfortunately didn't make my 5. So yeah, there really isn't much else to say, so I might as well just get straight on with it. And at number 5 is Gattaca, directed by Andrew Niccol. Yeah, this is a really good sci-fi movie, and I'd be very surprised if a lot of you haven't heard of this movie, because in recent years it's flown under a lot of people's radars, which I think is a shame because it is a really well-made movie. It's a sci-fi movie that doesn't necessarily feel like a sci-fi movie, even though it has a lot of the tropes and feel, and the whole story kind of feels very grounded in science fiction. The movie itself doesn't necessarily feel like that. If anything, it feels like a very clinical and very polished version of a noir movie. That being said though, the noir aspects are just there in the background and ever so slightly rear their head in certain parts. It's not the main focus of the movie, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's a neo-noir film, kind of like Blade Runner is, or Dark City. It's not like those movies, it's just a movie that has a lot of callbacks to the noir era in terms of the way it looks and its aesthetic, and that kind of adds to the whole crime and intricacy of the plot which is at play in this movie. Because one of my favourite things about this film is how naturally everything fits into place. The plot is very intricate and very tightly woven and works really well. And all of this set against a backdrop of world building that feels very natural and genuine and never feels like you're having all of this exposition or world building shoved down your throat, I think is a very good combo, mixed with some really fantastic performances from Jude Law, Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. I think this is a really interesting movie to watch, especially considering how complex the movie can get the more it goes on. And it also gives you a dilemma in terms of you want to root for this main character and what he's doing, but that being said, the many things that happen throughout this film can kind of blur the lines at times in terms of whether you truly want to root for this guy or not. And I do like that whole aspect of this movie, and it's one that makes you constantly question it as the movie goes on. On top of that, you have visuals that are really lovely, a brilliant score, and performances that just cement it as a really solid sci-fi thriller. And number 4 is a movie I definitely know a lot of you haven't heard of, and that is Cube, directed by Vincenzo Natali. Now, yet again, we have another sci-fi movie, but unlike Gattaca, which was more in line with a crime drama thriller kind of movie, this one feels a lot more like a claustrophobic thriller slash horror movie. And if you've seen the movie, you'll know exactly what I mean by that, because the entire movie takes place within the confines of a cube. Yeah, that to be more specific, it's a cube. It's a massive cube with a lot of smaller cubed rooms inside of it, and the whole premise of the movie is this small group of people trying to get out of it. But unfortunately, each room that they enter may or not be trapped, and they don't exactly know how they get out of it because the rooms are constantly shifting around them. So you can see what I mean by the whole claustrophobic horror aspect. And what makes this movie work so well is the sense of tension, the claustrophobic feel to the setting that they are in, and also the group of characters in which their dynamic completely shifts over the course of the movie. They start off as one thing, and by the time the movie is over, they're kind of at each other's throats, and seeing that progress throughout the movie is really fascinating. Now, even though I don't think this is a perfect movie, I do think the acting is a bit over the top in places. It does have a lot of things going for it that it does well, which is what makes it so rewatchable and so entertaining when you are watching it, because it's essentially just a group of people in a room. And that may sound really boring to some people on first listen. But the way this movie handles it, and the way in which they get around certain things, specifically in how it's directed and shot, I think is really clever, especially considering how low budget this movie actually was. I can't remember exactly how much the budget was, but for the time, it was really, really low. And the way they went about filming this movie was actually pretty ingenious. They just used one set, which was, the cubed room, and whenever they would enter another room, they basically just changed the colour of the lighting of the room to make it look like they've gone from a different room, and to make this massive cube feel massive, and that there is an endless amount of smaller cubed rooms inside of it. And I think that's really simple but really effective, because if you think about it, a group of people just going from cubed room to cubed room could probably get really boring really quickly. I mean, just look at the Cube sequels. They do what this movie does and do it the complete wrong way. But the way this movie handles it is really interesting, especially considering how they went about it on such a confined, low budget. And that's one of the things that fascinates me the most about this movie, how they pulled off so many different aspects of this film and how they made it as good as it is on such tight restrictions. And yeah, this is a really interesting movie. It's got some really good performances, even though some people, like I said, are a bit over the top at times. And it's just a really solid claustrophobic thriller that plays with character expectations and suspense and tension. I really don't know what else to say. I've pretty much just summed it up in a nutshell. It is a really good movie, and it also toys with your expectation as well. It is a really good movie. That's all I need to say. At number 3 is LA Confidential, directed by Curtis Hanson. I really don't want to say too much about this movie because I have already done a review of this film previously on my channel. I think it was a few years ago now. But all I will say for the time being is that it is pretty much a flawless film. The acting, the whole aesthetic of the movie, the direction, almost everything about the movie works perfectly. And one thing I adore about this movie, which I can't remember if I mentioned in my review or not, is how well it captures the feel of the 1950s. And it does a very good job of straddling a very fine line between being a accurate representation of 1950s Los Angeles, but also kind of leaning a little bit towards a almost over-the-top homage to 1950s Los Angeles as well. And it's a very fine line that the movie balances very well. And yeah, if you haven't seen LA Confidential, you really are missing out on one of probably the best crime dramas of the 90s. At number 2 is Princess Mononoke, directed by Hayao Miyazaki. Now, out of any movie on this list, if there was one movie in particular that I would just say, stop what you're doing and watch it now, I would definitely make that movie be Princess Mononoke, because it's just that good. I mean, I've got to the point now where I've seen enough Studio Ghibli movies and Hayao Miyazaki movies to know that you are getting what you pay for when it comes to that brand and that director as well. But this might just be the best thing that Ghibli has ever made. And that is saying something, because they've made Spirited Away, which is a masterpiece. They've made My Neighbor Totoro, which is also a near masterpiece as well. But this, considering what topics it tries to tackle, I think this is probably the most tight, refined, and also hard-hitting Ghibli movie that I've seen to date. And I think the fact that it does what it does in the way that it does it makes it one of the best, if not the best, Ghibli movie out there. One thing I will say, I was not expecting this going into it, is how violent the movie is. It's not like, really gory. It's not like you're watching a Tarantino film or something. But that being said, compared to every other Ghibli movie and other animation movies and animes of this caliber, it is pretty violent, especially for a PG, kids movie, so to speak. But that being said, I think the violence isn't there purely for show, because if it was, then I don't think it would be nearly as good as it is. The violence is basically there to kind of hammer in a specific point. Because other than it being Ghibli's most violent movie, I also think it's Ghibli's most mature movie to date. Because it tackles, like I said, a very, very bold subject matter, which is saving animals and the environment before it's too late. And that is a very mature subject to tackle, especially in an animated format. Because I know sometimes if people try and tackle that specific subject in the form of animation, it can become very ham-fisted and kind of forcing it down your throat. But the way Princess Mononoke does it never feels like that, and instead feels just integral to the part of the story, because they make it very clear from the word go that, right, this is the story and this is the theme and message we're going for, and we're pretty much just going to stick to that and intensify it as the movie goes on. It's not like one of those movies where it kind of does its own thing and then out of nowhere forces an environmental message on you, or is the other way around, where it's just nothing but environmental messages and then they start to introduce a story that's nothing related to that. Princess Mononoke handles it probably the best way any movie like this could. And yeah, it is a really, really excellent movie that I think should be seen by everyone. But that kind of goes for any Studio Ghibli movie at this point, whether it be, Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, Porco Rosso, any of those movies. I think everyone at some point in their life should watch any Ghibli movie, but specifically this one, because it hits the hardest and also gets its message across without being too preachy about it. It's a brilliant movie, and of course, the animation is bloody brilliant. It's kind of you kind of have to say that nowadays, though, when talking about a Hayao Miyazaki or Studio Ghibli movie. The animation is always going to be gorgeous. I mean, I could just go on about this movie for the rest of the video, but I have yet to do my number one. But yeah, long story short, watch Princess Mononoke. It's brilliant, and also the score is phenomenal. It might just be my favourite score from an animated movie, full stop. It's that good. And finally, my favourite movie from the year I was born is Good Will Hunting, directed by Gus Van Sant. I mean, this was kind of a no-brainer for me anyway, because in terms of very personal and effective character study dramas, this kind of ticks all the boxes. You have likeable characters that grow over the course of the movie and are written perfectly by Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, who, for their first major script, is genuinely amazing. Like, it's a really, really good script. And the fact that this is, I think, their first major one just kind of blows my mind. And considering where their careers have gone since then is really, fascinating. But what drives this movie home in being way better than it has any right to be, and I presume if you've seen the movie you know exactly what I'm going to say, is the relationship between Matt Damon's character and Robin Williams' psychologist. The scenes with them together elevate this movie from being just an average drama. They add a lot more humanity and realism to the movie that I wouldn't say was lacking from the movie, because there was a sense of genuine realism and naturalism to the movie. There was already that sense there in the film. But these one-to-one scenes with Matt Damon and Robin Williams just add another layer to what was already being established in the film. And they just work so well. Specifically, my favourite bit in the entire movie, outside of the bit near the end where Robin Williams' character receives a letter, that bit is just so heart-wrenching. But the moment that specifically sticks in my head to me is when Robin Williams' character is talking about his wife, who is no longer alive, and the little things that she used to do, specifically one thing she used to do in her sleep, I think anyway. And yeah, that scene is really funny, and the fact that that one bit is improvised just makes it so much more natural, and just makes that whole moment and all the scenes with them two together work so well. Yeah, if you haven't seen Good Will Hunting, or any of the movies I've mentioned in this video, then please do yourself a favour and change that. Watch all the movies that I've recommended here, because they are all absolutely brilliant. Now, there are a lot of movie reviewers on YouTube, like myself, who are currently all stuck in the same scenario. We're kind of just twiddling our thumbs, not knowing what to do, because coronavirus has delayed and cancelled a lot of new movie releases that we can't talk about because of that very reason. Which is why I want to take this opportunity to help strengthen this tightly knit community that we have and just make it that little bit stronger. I'm gonna tag 5 other movie reviewers to do the exact same thing that I've just done. Talk about their 5 favourite movies from the year they were born, and hopefully, again, they don't have to do this, but if they do it, I would like to see them tag a further more 5 people and just keep the train going, because I think by getting people to actually do something rather than doing nothing in this time of uncertainty, I think is a step in the right direction, because we don't know how long this is going to go on for. So by actually doing something rather than just sit there doing nothing on our channels, I think is a step in the right direction. And I thought I would do my bit to help this community kind of you know, kick something into gear. You know, I just think it would be a good idea. So, the 5 movie reviewers that I want to tag to do the exact same thing that I've just done are Luke Hearfield, Casey Causley, Sawyer Sabel, Elliot Cohen, and Rachel Reviews Everything. I look forward to seeing what you guys bring to the table. And yeah, if you like the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And most importantly, stay safe. Bye.